Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
Welcome to the Wild Health Podcast. This is Dr. Julie Foucher. I'm one of the Wild Health physicians, and I'm so excited to be here today with three other lovely women who I work with at Wild Health and talking about a topic that is so common as we work with our patients, which is perfectionism. So thank you all for being with me. We are already putting this to practice because this is our second take of recording. We had some technical issues, but we are not trying to make it perfect. We're just here to share with all of you our experience about perfectionism. So thank you guys for joining me. Let's do some quick intros. So Erika Snyder, want to give us a little bit of background on you?
Yes, and I agree. You are all lovely. I'm very excited to be here just to talk with you from remote working world. And my perfectionism button is tested, yes, and I'm so glad we got to do that today together. So my background is in mostly CrossFit to start on team sports when I was younger, and it kind of led me into from fitness to health to become a health coach at Wild Health. I've been a coach here for about a year and a half with maternity leave thrown in there, and also become a mental strength coach as well as an executive and leadership coach. So I've had a lot of experience in this subject and utilized coaching to understand a little bit more of myself and our patients. It's been a fun ride so far.
So awesome. Next on my screen, we have Ariana Fiorita. Do you want to share a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I've been a health coach here at Wild Health for a little over 2 years. And I also am trained as a dietitian, especially in the kind of sports and fitness world, as well as integrative and functional nutrition. And I think just from experiencing, just my experiences in college, I think that the nutrition profession actually breeds perfectionists. And I'm a recovering perfectionist myself. So I'm really excited about this topic today and to chat a little bit about that with you ladies.
Love it. And then Kelly James.
Yeah, so I have been a health coach now for almost 4 years at Wild Health now, and just my background prior to coming, I worked in an acute care hospital for almost 20 years, and then while doing that as well, I also hold a Master's of Divinity, and I worked for over a decade on the University of Louisville's campus with collegiate students. So I've worked with women in particular throughout their life stage, and so starting from college on, perfectionism has definitely been a topic that has been addressed in any setting that I've been in. I also consider myself a complete recovering perfectionist, and also have really explored mindfulness and stress reduction over the last couple of years and how that can really serve our clients and even my own life.
I love that. And I love just us sharing, and being open about our own experience. I think it goes a long way working with patients too, to know that we're all on this journey together. We're all, I think all of us here would consider ourselves recovering perfectionists. I know I am too. And my background in gymnastics growing up and in sports and in school definitely, led me in that direction. And so it's something I've personally worked a lot on over the last few years too. And I think we all talk to our patients about. So let's just dive in on what exactly are we talking about? So what is perfectionism? Where does it come from? And how does it show up, especially when we're talking about health? Erika, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so just in my own experience alone, perfectionism is for me just been about getting it right, getting it perfect, and doing that always. Um, no mistakes, no flaws, no faults along the way, no mishaps, no hiccups. And I said it in our first version. I'll say it again. It's like just saying it out loud is again even sillier the second time around when I say it. But the origin, I really believe, is so learned. Like we don't. I think I just read this on an Instagram post. We don't pop out like looking at our thighs and being like, ugh. Like I have a 1-year-old son, and I'm like, you're perfect. When, like, you're perfect the way you are, when does that change? And for me, I think, when it starts in a small, like a young developmental phase, you're in school, you're in sports, maybe you're in academics, you're not in any of that, maybe you have a completely different experience altogether, and there is a standard set for you by authority where you are being shown the way to go. So the thing that happens in your head is, okay, this is the way I go, and this is how I'm successful, and this is how I have to do it. And notice the language there. It's have to, it's should, it's this is what I need to do, and you're being told by others. And I think that just follows you into adulthood. And when are we ever taught to unlearn that? So origin can be many things, but I think for me, that's what I've experienced and seen in my patients of just so much unlearning of things that are very normal to learn when you're younger. But like, when do we stop living in that, or when does that become less of a default? Excuse me for the cold voice.
Kelly, you had on our first version, you jumped in with a definition that you had come across for perfectionism. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, so we're talking about perfectionism in health, but Erica's already, it happens in every area of our life. And so I did look up the definition and completely related. It said, Psychology Today actually said perfectionism is a trait that makes life an endless report card on accomplishments or looks. And I really thought about that. It's like all of life, an endless report card. Like, what happens in your body when you say an endless report card? Like, I get, closed up and
Scared,
tight,
yeah.
clench your teeth type thing. But the definition says, it goes on and says, perfectionists don't believe in unconditional love, expecting others' affection or even their own affection and approval to be dependent on a flawless performance. So going back to health, in general, it's like with health, we have to get all of the things right. We have to take all of the right supplements, or we have to do all of the right biohacks. We never eat gluten, sugar, dairy. We focus on doing health right and perfectly. We can't miss a workout even when our bodies are tired. And there's actually a nutrition name for people that are focused from a nutritional standpoint on perfectionism and health, and it's called orthorexia. And it's actually involves a fixation on only eating healthy things. And when I think about all of the words that Erika said, the shoulds, the have-tos, that we have to do it perfectly, it just leads to this hamster wheel of exhaustion. And I've lived that way many times. Erika said earlier, like, who would live this way? That sounds so silly for us to live in that type of world, and yet we put some kind of standard up. Others put the standard up, or we even put that standard up for ourselves, and then we have to meet that to gain others' approval or even our own. And the part that I came to conclusion on that's helped me break the cycle is that this is so hard because it hijacks my mood every single day. Mm-hmm. Like, what happens if I achieve health? What happens if I don't achieve health? It robs my joy in the present moment and in just the process of life. And it actually demotivates me towards progress. I'm just having one standard as a scale, and I end up exhausted.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So much there, and so much that I think we can all relate to. And I think the words that stood out to me were exhausting and endless, and how when we think about health specifically, now we think about biohacking, we think about all the new research and data that's coming out. It really is an endless process. There is no end in sight, with your health. If you have one goal of, improving certain labs or improving, your body composition, and you achieve that goal, then there's something you can chase next. And if that's what you're chasing in order to feel good about yourself or find your self-worth or feel loved or appreciated, then, you're probably never going to feel that way, because there really is no end. Ari, thoughts to add?
Yeah. I think, to that point, it's about exploring, what is perfection? And I always tell my patients, like, you're never going to be perfect. Or even my friends and family, like, perfection doesn't exist. So why do we expect it out of ourselves? And I think that perfection is one of those things that oftentimes is externally validated. So we're always looking for that perfect body type, those perfect labs, the perfect hair. Like, we're always striving to do what we deem is perfect, but it's in other people's eyes. Perfection for ourselves might look completely different. And I think that the phase of life that we're in has a huge impact on this. So perfection to me when I was 15 years old, compared to now, even compared to what perfection will look like when I'm 60, 65 years old, is likely going to be extremely different. And I think that being in the healthcare field, a lot of us are a lot more susceptible to feeling this way, because we're like these role models for other people, and we're often mentoring other people on what health looks like, but we don't necessarily give ourselves a lot of grace, because we're imposter syndrome is a word that kept coming up. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, how am I telling other people how to live their lives when I feel like mine is not, quote unquote, perfect? So I think perfection in healthcare has a lot of different meanings to me. And I think one of the big things in our world today is we're able to see all these other people on social media, or we're seeing these highlight reels, and we think that's perfect. But we have to remember that that's just one blip in time. That's not their real life. And so I think that also is a huge issue with how people are deeming perfection, especially in the healthcare world right now.
So true. All of these things. And I think for me, it was such a big light bulb moment to realize, I think for the longest time I thought that if we could just have great nutrition and great exercise and do all the quote unquote right things, the perfect things, that we would have optimal health. And I think through working with patients who I've seen now who are doing all the right things, right? All the things by the textbook. And I'm like, my mind is blown. How do you make this all happen with your life? And you have kids and you have a job, but they do. And yet they're still experiencing symptoms, or they're still experiencing a lot of anxiety, or a lot of just feeling unsettled about their health. And I think it illustrated to me the point that you brought up, Kelly, which is that so much of this comes with a lack of feeling unconditionally loved, and how we tend to place our worth on our achievements or on this standard of perfection, instead of knowing that inherently we are perfect. Just like Erika said about her son, when does that change? But all of us are perfect. We're perfectly ourselves at every moment, and that changes as we go through life. But it's until we start to understand that and embody that and really feel that and heal through all of the different messages that we've received throughout life that are telling us we're not perfect, and overcome those, we're probably never going to feel, we're never going to truly achieve I think health and fulfillment and peace. And I think the other tricky part about perfectionism is that it's sometimes rewarded, right? It's oh, I'm a perfectionist. That serves me really well in life, right? You get good grades and you do well in sports and you get a good job. And it's kind of this oh, it's a weakness, but it's actually a strength. When most of the time people who have a perfectionist attitude are very unhappy inside, right? Even if on the outside their resume looks good, or their grades look good. And I heard it compared recently to looking at something like addiction. Like often the roots of both patterns are very similar. They're in a lack of this like self-worth or feeling unconditionally loved. And some people that leads down a path towards addiction, which societally is looked down upon compared to someone with perfectionism. But a lot of times the roots are very similar. I think we heard, if any of you here listening follow Peter Attia and read his recent book, Outlive, he has a whole chapter on emotional wellness and talking about where his own perfectionism comes from and in healing that, and how, he took one path towards becoming a doctor and trying to solve all the world's hardest problems of how do we live as long as we can live. But very easily he could have taken another path and had a very different life. And he found himself sitting in a support group rehab facility with people who were struggling with drug abuse, who were struggling with different types of addiction, but yet the root of these things was very similar.
If results is always what we're going for, then and we tie always the end result to our worth, it just never satisfies the soul. It just robs us of joy. And but it has to be a practice, because like what Erika has said, we learn it and it serves us well, but we learn it and then we have to unlearn. Wait a second, results, great, but what if no results? Am I still worthy? Right? So,
and it's so hard to tease that out in our day-to-day lives, and being humans, that we can't avoid having certain results. So difficult. So on that note, how have you all navigated this? I know we said we're all recovering perfectionists, but what are some of the ways that you've navigated this personally to help unlearn some of those things that we learn just by growing up in the world today?
Is this podcast an hour or two? So recently I was following another coach on this, and she was discussing ideal self versus perfectionist self. And I'll speak about it in terms of health and how I've chatted about with my patients. I think we've all heard and talked about how small baby steps and small wins can make such a big difference in someone who labels themselves as a perfectionist, and including myself. Small wins are amazing. But for me, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes my brain will just always stamp it. No, not good enough. That was so small, but like it didn't really matter. And negate it in some way. My brain loves to do that sometimes. When I listened to this podcast and heard the description of ideal self, the way she was describing the ideal self was someone who plans and takes care of themselves from a place of grace, compassion, and understanding that things will go poorly. They will go poorly, they will go amazing, they will go in a neutral manner, they will go in all ways, and to include that in your expectations as what your ideal self is. So if I wanted to plan going out to dinner and I didn't want to eat gluten or sugar because it just didn't make me feel good, then I would plan that from a place of, I just don't want to feel that bad going to bed. And that's very different from, I shouldn't be eating gluten and sugar because my doctor told me not to, or it's bad, or it's a food I shouldn't eat, something with shoulds in there. So for me, I have really worked on the ideal self a little bit more, which compassion, grace, and like speaking nicely to myself was not to myself, all myself, nicely to myself. It wasn't modeled. I don't know if you guys have that experience either, but I didn't really watch that. So learning how to do that in my 30s is like, okay, this is my ideal self where I can start to understand what compassion looks like by planning from this place and not the other place, if that makes sense, and just deciphering the difference.
I love that. any other examples of how you've navigated this yourselves, Ari or Kelly?
Yeah, I think for me it's partly just getting older and having these experiences and learning from them. But I think one of the biggest pieces is just asking myself, am I doing this for me or am I doing this for what others think about me? And I think a lot of it really I realized was coming down to other people and like the ego part of it. Do you have the most education? Are you the fittest in the gym? Can you do all of these things? And I oftentimes found that it was just leading to burnout and stress and showing up in ways that like I didn't really want to show up. And especially in like close relationships, I think it affected my ability to share memories and really have like meaningful connection because I was always worried about, am I going to bed by 9 p.m.? Am I, eating the perfect diet? And I think it's about finding balance because it's also about respecting yourself. And so that kind of comes into finding the balance between, am I choosing to, say to Erica's example of like eating this way because it makes me feel good and it's like a form of self-love, or am I eating this way because I think that XYZ is like how I'll eat to like, because that's the healthiest diet right now, or because that's what so and so said is the way to go. And so I think that it's just finding it for myself and learning what works best for my body and my mental health. And I'm still a work in progress. Like I don't have it all figured out and I probably never will, but I think that's part of the fun of it.
And I think for myself, I have actually started to learn some of my the signs and symptoms. When I'm actually acting in that perfectionistic mode, and I see them even in my clients often, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing the exact same thing, and I'm guiding a client to maybe recognize that for themselves, and it's teaching me at the same time. But some of those that I see for myself, like black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, like I eat one cookie and I have to eat all the cookies, or I would skip one workout and therefore I'm never going to work out again. That's the nothing type of thinking. Or I have to do the 7 days a week, all or nothing, all in type exercise. I also see an inner critic come out with perfectionism. I didn't realize this, but not everybody has an inner critic. I was like, what is that like? But I recognize that when my inner critic gets a little bit, harsh, then I need to actually stop that. And Erika's been fantastic. She does great work with thoughts. Like you can actually evaluate your thoughts. You can stop them in their tracks and you can say, that's not even true. That's not serving me. And you can move on to what you would like to think, type things. When I actually get stressed and overwhelmed, that's when I find myself more in perfectionism. Fear of failure, because maybe I'm procrastinating on something because I want to do it perfectly and I don't want to actually even start that because what if I fail? So I don't even not starting that keeps me from failure. So these are a couple of things that I've recognized in myself of when perfectionism is coming out. But one of the biggest helps for me along the way is I'm always going to go back to mindfulness. I mean, mindfulness has taught me so much about just being present. And one of the pieces is that the moments of our life, of every single moment right in front of us, are the moments that make up our life. So if I'm always waiting for that result, then I'm robbing myself of so much. And I have, as you guys know, and I probably have said it on the podcast, but I have children that run cross country. And they have really big, audacious goals. Like my daughter's, trying to break 21 minutes for a 5K. My son's trying to he's in the 17 minutes for a 5K. And my brain is like, can't even wrap around that. But if they go into that race and they make an 18:02, are they any less valuable with that result than if they make a 17:50? There is 12 seconds difference. There is no difference in their worth whatsoever based upon that result. And if they only focus on that result at the end, then what are they missing all along the way? They're missing community. They're missing the friendships that are right in front of them. They're missing the love of running, the achievement of a hard workout that they nailed. Like, all of these things are part of our day-to-day life. And I got to the point that I just didn't want to base my worth on the one single result. And that's what I was doing with perfectionism. So counting the wins along the way and being present has been a key motivator for me.
Wow, so much that resonates there with me too. I think, coming from, my own background in sports and in academics, I think what helped me was first becoming aware of it and becoming aware of, like I think a few of you alluded to, the trade-offs that I had been making, because I was so focused on the achievements and on being so hard on myself. I really neglected a lot of the things that were most important, like my relationships. And so for me at first, I, did it in a very extreme way, but really kind of tried to flip my focus and stopped, chasing the things that I had been chasing before, and really invested in relationships and really invested in like helping to really nurture my own self-worth, self-love, like asking some of those questions, working through those things. And a big part of that for me, as Kelly mentioned, was mindfulness and meditation, of the practice of becoming aware of my thoughts. And because there's so much I was not even aware of before. And once I started having the awareness, it was like, whoa, there's a very strong inner critic here that is getting a very loud microphone all the time. And so then it became this process of, okay, how do I start to process these things and realize that I actually do have control over my thoughts, and which ones I pay attention to and which ones I don't, and the stories that I might have created in my head, and how I can help to reframe those or create new stories. And so using a variety of different tools for that, but I can definitely relate on all of those things, from just using thought tools. Like, all of us talk with our patients about different types of thought work, and we're all fans of Byron Katie and her questions, but that's one that's been really big for me. Just affirmations have been really big for me. I think there's so many different tools that we can use to start becoming aware of our thoughts, and then how do we start sort of questioning them and reframing them.
Julie, I'll just add one thing to that as you were talking, it reminded me of our conversation that we had yesterday about how I think a lot of people have a hard time sitting with their thoughts, and they have a hard time like slowing down. And I think a lot of perfectionist personalities tend to stay really busy and suppress, some of those things that maybe they don't want to encounter or they don't want to deal with. And I think that sometimes doing all of the things is also just pushing other things that you actually need to address to the bottom.
Yeah. That's that hamster wheel, I think, that Kelly brought up in the definition of, like, if I just keep moving, it's exhausting, but if I just keep moving, like, eventually maybe I will, get what I'm searching for. But so much of it comes from just sitting still, which is so counter to how I think we've all, or the messages that we receive, just living in the world today. And there's such value in sitting still and letting those things come up. And I think for me personally, I don't think I ever would have started working on this if I hadn't been forced to sit still during the pandemic and had time, like for the first time in my life, real idle time for a few months where I wasn't working. I wasn't, didn't have demands on my time. And that was what allowed a lot of it to come up. But just it's not something that's easy to do when you have a lot going on in life. And so sometimes the hard part is just creating space for it. I love that. When you notice, so some practical tools for the patients that you're working with. So when you notice this coming up with your patients, do you have any examples of tools you use with your patients, or ways that you help people to work through perfectionism?
Yeah, so what Kelly was talking about, thought work has changed my whole experience. I think I discovered it 5 or 6 years ago from another coach who also followed Byron Katie. And I go into thoughts with them a lot. usually it's thoughts that we have already discussed. It's not good enough. That small wins aren't good enough, and usually some type of not good enough or attachment to worth there. But that takes some time. I think it starts just with usually listening to the language and noting key words like should, which is probably the most common. And latter thoughts are something that I discovered also years ago with thought work, that essentially mean I can't go from this is not good enough to this is good enough, but I can go from I'm willing to believe that this is good enough, or I'm open to start to believe that it's not good enough. Because the brain does not want to be convinced of something that it doesn't believe. I think that's where perfectionists, including myself, fail at changing the language, because that jump is just too big. To hate your body and then love your body, it's not easy. Not that simple. So it's got to be, let's stop at neutral. Let's start with, I have a body. I like my hands. I remember saying that years ago when I did a lot of body work. Like, what do I like about my body? And Julie and Ari, if you could relate to the CrossFit world of there was a body to get. And if you didn't have it, maybe you had the skills, maybe you had the times, but you didn't have the body, it felt like a huge failure in the world. When I have patients who are having similar experiences with nutrition and exercise, usually we do ladder work, and we get really, really, really granular with practicing the language over and over again and just changing those neural pathways one thought at a time in one subject.
Mm-hmm. And I can relate to that. It's so hard to do because your brain's going to tell you and your ego's going to tell you, like, be telling you no. And it's going to be like, oh, this is stupid. This is not going to make a difference. And so it doesn't want to practice those things, right? So sometimes you need someone to sit down with you and be like, no, we're going to focus on this.
Yeah,
like I'm willing to think it's possible to believe, to start to understand that I have a body.
Right. Starting at the beginning. Any other tools that come up frequently that are kind of your go-tos or you find work well with patients, Ari?
Yeah, I think that really digging into values and what is important to the person. I know as health coaches, we talk a lot about visualization and like figuring out, kind of back to Erika's ideal self, and making sure that the things that they're doing and putting into place throughout their days, their weeks, their months are aligned with that person that they want to be. And it's, again, getting back into like, really, who's that person you want to be? Not who does, my friends want me to be, or who does society want me to be? It's who do I want to be? And I think that's something that a lot of people are not used to thinking about. And when I walk patients through this, a lot of times it has some almost like superficial answer, initially, until we really think about like, how do we get down to the root of this, and how do we figure out like where are these tendencies rooted? And so that's something that's been really helpful. And I think journaling, sitting with thoughts, I think mindfulness and meditations, visualization meditations are all part of those tools in the toolbox. And I think that the other thing is just having somebody to like talk to and point out some of these tendencies. As a coach, it can be a little bit difficult to do that, but I think that that's part of our role, is really pointing out when we're seeing something and bringing it to light. And so that's something that has been really effective in my coaching practice over the past year. And I'm curious to hear kind of more what you guys do, but those are some of the tools that have been most effective for me.
I love that. And I think the example of understanding what do people really want, and is what they're saying they want actually what they really want, right? How many people come in and their goal is weight loss, right? And then you start digging into that, like, well, why? And what is it that they really want? They might really just want to have great energy and feel joyful and be able to play with their kid. Like, it may be much more complex than just a number on a scale, but that's something that often, society is telling us that we need to do. So I love that, like, really continuing to ask that question of why and what is most important, and stripping away all the external expectations and voices to get to that truth, which takes time, right? It's not often in one conversation.
Yeah, and I think kind of back to like even just our health score, we have all these different variables that play into it and kind of gamify it. But I think people get caught up in, why is my Aura data not as good as so-and-so's data, or my HRV is lower than so-and-so's HRV. And so I think it's always this like comparison game. And and I think it's just as a coach too, like just, taking it back a step and be like, but what's important to you? And your data might be completely different. It's not just data. It's also how you feel, how you're in tune with your body, the connections that you make. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kelly, how about you? What are some of the things that you find to be most effective with patients?
I'm sorry, I lost just for a second. So just going back, what Erika and Ari said, I mean, I'm doing a lot of the same things. But one of the things I think I do the most is I take notes of all of the amazing things my clients are doing and how resilient they are. So when they're telling me all of the negative things, that I didn't meet this goal, or I didn't do that, or, I didn't, all of the things, but then they've told me I've made this appointment and I've made that, this win with a family member, I take notes of all of those positive things. And then I reinforce, look at your strengths, look at what it is that you are doing, that should be applauded and should be really celebrated along their own journey. Because I really that's been my biggest help, is it's not the destination, it's the as we go, what are those things in front of us that are the wins, and what is the joy in front of us right now. And even the thought work, I do the thought work a lot for myself, interrupting my own thoughts, interrupting okay, you're telling me you always do this, or you never do this. And it's getting back to the all or nothing thinking, or trigger words, the should word. I should do this. Who told you you should do this? So exploring that. So, but honestly, I think my favorite in moving us forward, my clients forward, is taking a list of all of the incredible things that they are doing and highlighting those so that they can celebrate them.
I love that. That reminds me of something that I've just done personally that has helped me a lot a few times. One is just at the end of the day, sometimes writing those down, like celebrating some of the wins. But I've gotten to the end of the week a few times on the weekend, and I'm feeling down. Like, oh man, I didn't get any of the things done that I wanted to do this week, and I'm so behind, and I have so much to catch up on. And I've just sat down with a notebook, and I've written down, here are all the things that went great this week. And I always leave that process feeling so inspired and optimistic and proud and grateful. And, our brains tend to focus on the negative. That's just how our brains are designed, to help us stay away from danger. But sometimes we have to make a little bit of extra effort to help them focus on the positive and see all of the good things that have happened. And so I love that you're doing that for your patients too, Kelly, because sometimes we need someone to reflect that back to us. Mm-hmm. That's great. I think the other thing too that I find to be helpful is thinking about talking to yourself as if you're talking to a friend. So sometimes, like, we know the inner critic can be so harsh and so severe, and we think we have to be so hard on ourselves, because if we're harder on ourselves, then whatever anybody else says isn't going to be as bad, right? We're preparing ourselves for that. But we would never talk to a friend the way that we talk to ourselves most of the time. And so whether that's reframing your thoughts, whether that's getting a pen and paper out and writing a letter to yourself as if you're talking to a friend. I find that to be another really useful tool for starting to flip some of those thoughts on their head. All right, last question before we wrap up is a piece of advice you would tell your past self before you started down this journey of recovering perfectionist, when you were just a plain perfectionist. What would you tell yourself about perfectionism with your health?
Oh, Lordy. So I never say that. I don't know why I said that now, but I'll say it. Oh, Lordy. So, so I think I'll go back to CrossFit, Erica, because she was there, she was in it. I'll just say there's no wheel. Get off the hamster wheel first of all. Realize how many beautiful things you do in a day, in a workout, in a coaching hour, to help other people, and the energy that you bring, not the body and the loudness you have. I used to be really loud. And it's the essence of you. It's not what you can lift. It's not even the words you're saying. It's the soul that you bring to your day and your people and your mission. And I would tell myself the same thing to this day. Kelly, you mentioned orthorexia. I have that, or I'm actually still not sure what the lingo is for that unhealthy obsession with fitness and nutrition. I don't feel like I have that now, but it shows up in times of survival mode. So postpartum, it shows up where I notice I have a fixation on the food I'm eating or the workouts that I need to do again. And so I would tell myself the same thing of, it really isn't about that. It's about the experience that you're having every day in your life with your son, with your family, with your friends, with your job. And it's, like you said, Kelly, that was great. It's about the way there. Get off the wheel. Get off. It's not a ride you want to be on.
Great advice. Great advice. Get off the hamster wheel. How about you, Ari? What would you tell yourself?
Yeah, when I was preparing for this podcast, a couple of things came up, and one of them was that no one's going to remember you for, necessarily the education that you had or where you were on the whiteboard at the gym, right? Like, they're going to remember you for how you made them feel, the experiences and the memories that you've made together. And that always hits home for me. And when I'm having a bad day or feeling like really defeated, I always come back to that. Like, what's one nice thing that I can do for somebody today that's going to make both of us feel really good? And I think the other thing is like thinking about, I mean, this sounds really morbid, but like when you're on your deathbed, like, what do you want to have achieved? Like, I don't care about saying busy, right? I used to think busyness meant productivity, but I think that, and again, something I'm still working on, definitely not perfect, but like, it's okay to rest. It's okay to give yourself space for that. And I think that is health, is understanding like when to push yourself to do things and, stick to your goals, and when it's okay to like take a step back, reevaluate, and like give yourself just a little bit of extra care. So that's probably what I wish I could tell my younger self, all those years that I just kind of like grinded through. And I don't regret any of it. I love those experiences and learn from them, but I think that there's beauty in rest and giving yourself grace too.
Love it. How about you, Kelly?
A couple things I thought of. Number one, there is no such thing as perfection. It doesn't exist. And I think I would tell my inner critic to take a hike. And that the biggest thing for me, probably the most, is that I'm loved as I am. That I don't need anybody else's approval. I love what Ari said, and how what is important is how you make people feel at the end of the day. I've in the past, I had gotten to a point, I've never been in the CrossFit world that you girls are in. I'm just I call myself an exercising mom. I got into it just from a health perspective, but I like to do videos, and you see a certain standard on these videos. And it can be any realm, but just from a health realm, I'd see these standards. I'm like, I'm doing the same workouts they're doing. Why do I not look like I'm doing the same workouts that they're doing? And I would just cause, you'd get on a scale, and the scale number on that scale would determine how your day went. And I spent too many years, ladies, determining my self-worth based upon false standards. And I have moved my standard towards I'm kinder to my body. I don't evaluate it. I look at what my body does for me. I've had 3 beautiful children that my body helped me produce. I work out now for a health perspective. I run and I look at the sky and I feel the breeze on my face, and I look at the flowers along the way, and I run for the journey. And I would just tell myself, to stop using these standards to determine your worth, because you are good enough.
Oh, beautiful. I feel like I can't say it better myself, but I love your inner critic taking a hike, Kelly. I have this little visual now of my inner critic sitting in an empty movie theater, and the inner critic is sitting up in the very top back corner. So they can watch the movie, but they're definitely not running the show, they get a seat, but it doesn't mean I have to listen to what they have to say.
I may not give them a ticket, Julie. No ticket.
Yeah, that's right. But I agree. I think I would just tell myself, that you are enough, that you are loved, and that this moment is perfect. Where you are right now is perfect. And that is also part of life. Sometimes you might be a crying mess on the floor, and that's perfect for that moment. And that's maybe what you need, or is a part of your story, or a part of you becoming who you're becoming, and just embracing all of it, the messiness of life, because life certainly isn't perfect, but each, it is in some way it's perfect for us, and it's perfect each moment along the way, and not questioning that or feeling like it should be something else or something else that we expect. So
I have to say something.
Yes.
I love all 3 of you the way you are. Let's just say
Thanks,
that.
Erika. Yeah. And just, radiating that out into the world, right? Loving and accepting people just the way they are, so we can all support each other. I love that. Well, this has been so fun and so great. I know we got a rocky start with our recording, but it's been so fun just to be able to talk with all 3 of you about this, on something that's so personal for all of us, and then also something that we talk with patients about every single day. So thank you again for taking the time and being so open and vulnerable and sharing your own stories and experiences here too.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you're a Wild Health patient, you might not know, but you have access to our referral program. This gets your friends and family 25% off Wild Health services. Just head to Clarity, and in the top right corner, you'll see Refer a Friend. Click there, and you'll be brought to a page with your referral code. Happy sharing.